ومنهم من يمشي على أربع يخلق الله ما يشاء إن الله على كل شيء قدير. لقد أنزلنا آيات مبينات والله يهدي من يشاء إلى صراط مستقيم. ويقولون آمنا بالله وبالرسول وأطعنا ثم يتولى فريق منهم من بعد ذلك وما أولئك بالمؤمنين. For those of us who are just coming in, inshallah we'll begin in about 5 to 7 minutes. Just waiting upon Sheikh to come, and we're just going to read a few more verses of the Quran. وَإِذَا دُعُوا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ لِيَحْكُمَ بَيْنَهُمْ إِذَا فَرِيقٌ مِّنْهُمْ مُعْرِضُونَ وَإِن يَكُن لَّهُمُ الْحَقُّ يَأْتُوا إِلَيْهِ مُذْعِنِينَ أَفِي قُلُوبِهِم مَّرَضٌ أَمِ ارْتَابُوا أَمْ يَخَافُونَ أَن يَحِيفَ الله عليهم ورسوله بل أولئك هم الظالمون. إنما كان قول المؤمنين إذا دعوا إلى الله ورسوله ليحكم بينهم أن يقولوا سمعنا وأطعنا وأولئك هم المفلحون. ومن يطع الله ورسوله ويخشى الله ويتقه اتقى ويخشى الله ويتقه فأولئك هم الفائزون. وأقسموا بالله جهد أيمانهم لئن أمرتهم ليخرجن قل لا تقسموا طاعة معروفة إن الله خبير بما تعملون. قل أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول فإن تولوا فإنما عليه ما حمل وعليكم ما حملتم وإن تطيعوه تهتدوا وما على الرسول إلا البلاغ المبين. وعد الله الذين آمنوا منكم وعملوا الصالحات ليستخلفنهم في الأرض كما استخلف الذين من قبلهم وليمكنن لهم دينهم الذي ارتضى لهم وليبدلنهم من بعد خوفهم أمنا يعبدونني لا يشركون بي شيئا ومن كفر بعد ذلك فأولئك هم الفاسقون. وأقيموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة وأطيعوا الرسول لعلكم ترحمون. لا تحسبن الذين كفروا معجزين في الأرض ومأواهم النار ولبئس المصير. وأقيموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة وأطيعوا الرسول لعلكم ترحمون لا تحسبن الذين كفروا معجزين في الأرض ومأواهم النار ولبئس المصير آمنت بالله صدق الله العظيم. So, stuff should be coming right now. Inshallah, we're going to start our program. And after the program, we'll have a quick Q&A. So, bismillah.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. اللهم لا أحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك. اللهم فصل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد، فقال الله تبارك وتعالى: يا أيها الذين آمنوا ادخلوا في السلم كافة ولا تتبعوا خطوات الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين. وقال الله تبارك وتعالى: فلا وربك لا يؤمنون حتى يحكموك فيما شجر بينهم ثم لا يجدوا في أنفسهم حرجا مما قضيت ويسلموا تسليما. صدق الله العظيم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a complete deen. This deen is complete, it is perfect, it is comprehensive. It has everything that humanity needs. And this deen is very much concerned with the needs of humanity. We are multi-dimensional beings. We have a physical aspect to us, a spiritual one, a mental one, a social one. We have multiple aspects to our being, to our existence. Islam is not only sensitive to those various aspects of our being, but its teachings support, protect, enhance all of those aspects. And not only that, it's a set of teachings that can be applied in every era, in every part of the world. Its teachings are timeless. Its teachings are extremely versatile in their application. And its teachings guarantee the success of humanity. It is with this belief that we go into Islam. It is with this belief that we progress in Islam. And this belief is the driving force behind every believer. So, in essence, it's not really necessary to understand the wisdoms of things. A believer does not wait to understand the wisdom of something before doing it when it comes to a commandment of Allah. The statement of the believers that Allah mentions in the Quran is سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا. We have heard the command and we have obeyed the command. We may understand it completely, we may understand it incompletely, we may not understand it at all, but whatever we have understood as the commandment, we will fulfill it, irrespective of all of these conditions. The mind is not our ilah. Our intellect is not our God, which must be appeased, which must be pleased, which must be content before we can go ahead and do something. This is not the temperament of Islam. It would not be Islam if it was subject to me understanding it first. Islam begins with submission and it ends with submission. Having said that, if and once our dedication to the teachings of Islam is unequivocal, it is absolute, it is unconditional, and in our yearning to develop more wisdom or a more profound understanding of our religion, we happen to learn about some of the wisdoms and advantages that may be of a worldly nature or of a spiritual nature, there is no harm in this. Okay? I am mentioning these as an opening, and these points are extremely critical because we're going to talk about the advantages and benefits of one of the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is fasting. But I must emphasize that you and I will not wait to understand the benefits and advantages of fasting before we start fasting. And if ever somebody comes up and says there are disadvantages of it, we're not going to pay attention to it. We're not going to be attached to those advantages. Those advantages may motivate us, they may give us some insight, they may give us some clarity. Like Ibrahim alayhi salam asked to see the kayfiyya, the actual method of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revives the dead. It wasn't whether Allah could or not. Arini kayfa tuhyi al-mawta. He wanted to see the kayfiyya, he wanted to see the process of it. Allah said, well, is there something lacking in your conviction that I can do this? أَوَلَمْ تُؤْمِنْ? He said, no. Absolutely not. وَلَكِنْ لِيَطْمَئِنَّ قَلْبِي. It will add to the contentment of my heart. So once we understand this, and this rule is general, it applies to every aspect of Islam. The reason I'm mentioning this is that we live in a time of uncertainties. Very easily doubts and hesitations are introduced into our minds. And then we allow those to proliferate. We allow them to expand, to increase, and sometimes we allow them to overtake our mind and our thinking patterns. A Muslim does not allow that to happen. So after this, let's get right into this fasting. كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ. كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِن قَبْلِكُمْ. Fasting is not exclusive to this ummah, to this nation, to this sharia of Islam. Every prophet that was sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had some teachings that were common amongst all of them. For example, Tawheed, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the teachings of Risala, prophethood, the teachings pertaining to Akhirah. And regarding commandments, they all had the commandment of Salat, Qiyam, and Zakat. These three commandments were common in the Sharia of all the prophets alayhimu salatu wassalam. So Islam and Quran, which is an affirmation of those previous scriptures, affirms this also, that fasting was prescribed to previous nations. What was the outcome, the objective of it? لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, to acquire this thing called taqwa, and we're going to come to that towards the end of this session. Fasting is a process which is extremely beneficial for the body, the mind, and the soul. And its benefits have been known for hundreds or possibly thousands of years. Even in the literature of the fathers of medicine, people like Hippocrates, we find the benefits of abstaining from food, the benefits of fasting. Traditionally, in various disciplines of medicine, fasting was used and is used. It was used for various methods, and sometimes strategically, therapeutically, to address specific conditions, specific diseases and disorders. Some of the recently researched benefits of fasting include a regulation of many of the internal systems of the body. And I'm only going to talk about what the most recent research, which is going to be within the last 10-15 years, what the medical literature is saying about fasting. After the tests, after the studies, the clinical studies, the reports that have been written and issued by renowned authorities, fasting regulates your metabolism. Metabolism is basically the rate at which your body is breaking down food and deriving nutrients from it. It's the process of extracting energy, nutrients, minerals, vitamins from what you and I consume. Fasting enhances this. And the reason why it enhances it is because once you take out the element of constantly feeding, constantly stuffing the body, it has a chance to focus on the food that is in it, and then it goes a little bit beyond that. So first, the body is going to break down the food that you've introduced. But remember, when you're eating regularly every few hours, you haven't really given the body a chance to break down all of the food that was in it. As a result, the remnants, you can say, of that food are stored in various forms in the body. So one of the forms in which food, excess food, unused food is stored is glucose in the form of blood sugar. So if we keep feeding it and we don't give it a chance to break it down, well, the outcome is obvious. Once the body breaks down the food that we have given it, and to completely break it down, scientists say it takes up to 8 hours. If you keep it empty, if you don't introduce food into it for 8 hours, then the body goes to the next level and starts breaking down the glucose that is stored up in the body. And it's important to do that. Once the glucose that is stored in the body is used up, then the body goes into another phase. It goes into the fat that is stored in the body. And it starts breaking down the fat and uses it for energy. This process is called ketosis. An interesting thing happens at this juncture. A lot of the toxins in the body are stored in the fatty tissue of the body. So once the body starts breaking down fatty tissue, it also starts breaking down and expelling the toxins from the body. So it starts detoxifying. This all happens after the 8-hour window. So what has happened? Your body has had a chance to properly break down all of the food that was introduced into it. Secondly, it has a chance to tap into the glucose stores of the body and use that up for energy. And once that is finished, then it goes into the next step, which is to break down fat. Normally, to get into a cycle where your body is constantly breaking down fat and not protein, not glucose, it's used up the glucose, it usually takes 3 to 4 days of fasting to initiate this. And it takes a specific kind of diet, which is being experimented with and used by doctors. It is called the ketogenic diet. What the ketogenic diet is a diet that consists of a large percentage of fat, a small percentage of protein, and a very small percentage of carbohydrates. And then there are periods of fasting. So at both ends of the day, for example, this diet is introduced, then the person is made to fast in between, and the body starts using this up, and something very interesting happens. First of all, this type of diet activates the brain. This type of diet is being used by medical experts at the Johns Hopkins facilities to treat children with epileptic seizures. It has been found to be one of the most effective treatments for seizures in small children. This diet is also being used for patients that have Parkinson's. And because of the stimulating effect of the fasting, they're finding that it's actually regenerating stem cells. And it's sending messages to the stem cells of the body to regenerate very quickly. And all of a sudden, the messages that were not going from the brain are starting to go. And pathways are being created for those electrochemical impulses to be complete, for those circuits to be complete. The brain is firing up and the body is responding. Fasting is being used for cancer patients. People who have already been diagnosed with cancer and are going in for chemotherapy, there are doctors that are prescribing fasting to them for 3 days prior to chemotherapy, because fasting also revamps your immune system. What doctors say is that the immune cells that are sitting idle, the damaged cells, the old cells that are sitting in your body being unused, they're expelled through the process of fasting. Once those cells are expelled, your immune system gets a boost. And if you do this before a session of chemotherapy, the immune damage that occurs out of chemotherapy is diminished very, very significantly. Obviously, fasting helps with weight loss. There are a lot of myths regarding this. Some people say that, well, if you starve yourself, I don't know if there's any athletes here or not, but there's a myth that circulates in the sports world that if you don't eat every 2 to 3 or maximum 4 hours, then your body starts storing fat. And if you starve yourself, then the body starts burning protein and storing fat. This is incorrect. That process doesn't happen unless you starve for 60 hours consecutively. Then that process happens. That your body starts burning through protein and storing fat. So this is incorrect. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about fasting and athletics in just a few moments. So fasting does help with weight loss. However, it's necessary to maintain a proper diet while fasting. If you're eating junk and fasting in between, really, you're not doing yourself that much of a favor. If your idea of iftar is samosa and pakode, okay, I have news for you. And one of my teachers used to call this kind of stuff, she had a term for it, she used to call them gut grenades. Because those things are unleashing their wrath inside your gut. And yeah, you might lose some weight just because your calorie count is down, but guess what's going to happen the moment Ramadan is over? It's going to come back and then some. So proper diet at both ends of the day, proper hydration needs to be maintained in order for this fast to become a physically rewarding and long-lasting experience. People talk about becoming weak when they fast. And I'm going to address this when I talk about athletics and sports, but disease in the world today, in the modern context, is not because of insufficient eating. It's not. Disease in the modern context, especially in the Western context, is related primarily to two things: eating too much and eating the wrong stuff. We are not sick today because we're not eating enough. That would be an absolute fallacy. It would be a lie to say people in America are getting sick because they're not eating enough. That's a lie. Are they eating too much? Well, that's something that is being, researched more and more and more. We're eating too much and we're eating the wrong things. Interestingly, we're eating all of these different types of things. I don't want this to turn into a discussion on diet because that's a whole discussion in and of itself. But energy levels are lower today than ever before. Lethargy is at an all-time high. We are constantly drained. We're turning to stimulants like caffeine more and more and more. Our kids are turning to caffeine. My daughter asked me for a cup of coffee, and I'm just baffled at why. Why would you even think of it? Part of it is culture, but part of it is, well, I need to stay up, so I need this. I need to work, so I need this. We're turning to stimulants. Fasting powers you up. It enables your body to access its true stores of energy. And if you fast properly, with the right diet on both ends of the day, you will have more mental energy and more physical energy. And you will have mental clarity. You will be able to think better, make better decisions, and you will feel better. After 3 or 4 days of fasting, once you start ridding the body of those toxins from the fatty tissue, then what happens is that endorphins are released into your bloodstreams. These are the hormones that make you feel good. You start feeling upbeat. You start looking at things positively, and it affects your decisions, your decision-making processes. It affects your behavior. And ultimately, what doctors are saying is that those who eat less live longer. Those who eat less live longer. Those who fast live longer. So a lot of what we're telling our kids, it's just good old wives' tales. You need to eat this much, you need this many meals a day, you need this and this and this and this. Of course, we're bombarded with messages, with advertisements that are pushing us to buy more food and to eat more. Fasting is not very good for the food industry. It doesn't sell products. So we are constantly told, you have to eat this, you have to eat that, you have to eat this many times, you need this. And you go into a grocery store, you just go crazy looking at all of the possibilities. But Fasting helps you stay younger. It helps your body consistently and constantly regenerate itself, renew itself. It boosts your immune system. And yes, it adds to longevity. Fasting, because it improves your metabolism, it also improves your hunger. People who are eating every 3 or 4 hours a day, they're not really experiencing hunger. They can't. They might be eating on the clock, but they're not experiencing true hunger. We talked about fasting improving your brain functions. Some scientists have discovered that fasting boosts the production of a protein called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. And it is because of this that now fasting is being used extensively to treat patients of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And as I mentioned, it's being used to teach those children with epileptic seizures. Over 15 studies have been done, clinical studies, some of them with over 700 participants. And these studies have been done on Muslim athletes in the month of Ramadan. And the nature of the studies has been different in each case. But here are some of the main things that people were looking for. A, performance. Does it affect your performance? B, your energy levels. C, your sleep patterns. And D, your body's ability to recover after participating in sports while fasting. So obviously, there are well over 1 billion Muslims that are fasting, alhamdulillah, in the month of Ramadan. So there are plenty of subjects, very easy to find subjects for this study. And these Muslims are going to schools and colleges and universities, and they're actively participating in organized sports. So here's what they found, the summary. During the fasting day, there was no difference in the performance of these athletes. The only time they felt a slump or a low in their energy was actually at nighttime, after they had broken their fast. And this is across the board, whether they're soccer players, football players, even weightlifters, judo athletes, martial arts experts. Across the board, this thing was tested over and over again. The case where sleep was compromised, they said they felt sleepy during the day. This was attributed to they're not getting enough sleep at night because of Ramadan, praying Taraweeh, getting up for suhoor. So because there was a shortage of sleep, it was affecting their day, but it was nothing to do with the process of fasting itself. It was to do with the activities of Ramadan. What about hydration? What about hydration? Scientists found that if the water intake was maintained between iftar and suhoor, if sufficient water intake occurred, it was enough, ample for the athlete to get through the day, whether they were training or they were competing, and it did not affect their performance. The only type of performance that some studies showed and others did not, some studies showed a compromise in the performance, were aerobic activities. Aerobic activities. But anaerobic activities such as weightlifting, powerlifting, martial arts, they found absolutely no difference. In fact, some of the tests that were done were quite strenuous. 60 minutes of endurance running on fasting. For men that were moderately trained, they were not professional athletes, it did not diminish their performance at all. In some studies, 90 minutes of running at 70 to 75% intensity, with fasting and without fasting, the fasting did not affect their performance. Now, we can go on and on. But the bottom line is, This is something very healthy. This is something that helps you detox your body. It's something that helps your immune system, your metabolism, your brain and cognitive functions, restores your energy, rejuvenates your cells. It helps recycle all of the junk in the body and convert it into positive energy. This is the summary of it. SubhanAllah, in the Sunnah we find that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used to regularly fast every Monday and Thursday. Today, doctors have actually come out with this 5-2 fast. They call it the 5-2 fast. Eat for 5 days, fast for 2 days. Some doctors have come out with this 3-day-a-month fast. That you need to fast for 3 days. That's also in the Sunnah. So we will find many, many things. And doctors, researchers, scientists will continue to find many, many things over the course of the history and over the course of the future. That's not what interests us in fasting. Those are just side benefits. It's nice to know that it's doing this and this and this. But guess what, world? We've been doing this for 1400 years and we will continue to do it, even if you hadn't discovered these things. Let's move a little bit to the spiritual side. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. It's been prescribed so that you attain this quality of taqwa. And taqwa is a state that a person lives in. It's a state in which a person is prepared to do whatever it takes to avoid the displeasure of Allah. This is taqwa. To do whatever it takes to avoid the displeasure of Allah Azza wa Jal. This is taqwa. Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu asked Ubay ibn Ka'b radiallahu anhu that define taqwa for me. So he defined it by giving him an example. He said, "O Amir al-Mu'mineen, have you ever walked on a path that is very narrow and it is surrounded by thorns on both sides? Have you ever tried to walk down such a path?" He said, "Yes." He said, How did you make it down that path?" He said, "Well, I pulled in my loose clothing, I drew it close to myself, I shrunk, and then I had to be very, very diligent. Shammartu wajtahadtu. I pulled in my clothing, I shrunk myself, and very carefully I took each step so that I don't get pricked by the thorns." Ubay ibn Ka'b radiallahu anhu said, that is the example of taqwa. A person lives their life in this constant state of awareness and avoiding those thorns of the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, making sure that no part of them gets pricked by those thorns. This is taqwa. This is the ultimate objective of fasting. So if somebody were to ask the spiritual benefit of fasting, the first spiritual benefit is taqwa. But the question is how? How does staying hungry give me taqwa? So, let's take a closer look. This heart is the king in our body. I'm not talking about the physical heart that pumps blood. I'm talking about the heart in the sense of our feelings, the center of our emotions, the center of our faith, where our faith rests. This heart is the king. And all of the other limbs are like its subjects. Rasulullah ﷺ says, "Ala inna fil jasadi mudgha." In the body is a piece of flesh. إِذَا صَلَحَتْ صَلَحَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ. If it is correct and rectified, the entire body is rectified, meaning all of the actions that a person performs are rectified. وَإِذَا فَسَدَتْ فَسَدَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ. And if it is corrupted, it is ruined, it is spoiled, then the rest of the body is spoiled, meaning all of the actions and deeds are spoiled. أَلَا وَهِيَ الْقَلْبِ. It is the heart. So now, this heart is of different kinds. In other words, there are different conditions that this heart can be in. There can be a heart which is very, very healthy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls it al-qalbu salim. He says, يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ. On the day of judgment, no one's wealth nor children will be of any avail, إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ, except for the one who brings a rectified, purified, intact, salim, intact heart to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-qalbu salim is the heart that is free from wrong beliefs. It is free from doubts and suspicions regarding what Allah has revealed. It is free from the other diseases of the heart. Things like arrogance and pride, things like miserliness, stinginess, things like hatred and jealousy, things like covetousness, things like being overly attached to this dunya. These are all diseases of the heart. The intact, healthy heart is that which is free from all of these. At the opposite end of the spectrum is the dead heart. The dead heart. This is the heart that is completely deprived of the recognition of Allah, of Iman, of all of those things that are crucial in our faith. That is at the other end. It is dead. It is lifeless. In between, you have al-qalbu saqim. You have the heart which is ill. In other words, it's functioning to some extent, but it's also dysfunctional in some aspects. Like a person who has an ailment, a person who is sick, there are some functions of their body that they're able to carry out and others that they're not able to carry out depending on where the sickness is. If it's to do with their digestive system, well, that part of their body is not functioning the way it should be. If it's their endocrine system, it's going to be another set of symptoms that we're going to see. If it's to do with their nervous system or specific aspects of their nervous system, there are going to be specific symptoms that manifest themselves. If it's to do with the skin, then there's going to be a set of symptoms and diseases related to that. So this heart has many, many aspects and dimensions to it. And all of those aspects and dimensions, all of those functions need to be healthy. And any one of them can be inflicted with disease. So doubt and suspicion, Allah calls it a disease. فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ فَزَادَهُمُ اللَّهُ مَرَضًا. Allah calls this doubt and suspicion about what is being revealed, Allah calls it an ailment, a sickness. And like other sicknesses, it needs treatment. إن اتقيتن فلا تخضعن بالقول فيطمع الذي في قلبه مرض. Don't speak softly in the presence of non-mahram men. فيطمع, the one in whose heart is a disease, he may start aspiring, he may start building up hopes. So what is that? It is their shahwa, which they cannot control. This has been called a marad. It has been called a disease. So there are different types of diseases of the heart. Each one has its own symptoms, and each one has its own treatments and cures. There are 4 things which some ulama have said are the primary gateways of sickness and disease. 4 things. There are many more, but there are 4 that are primary. So, the first is the tongue. Talking is something we do every day. But these words are either in our favor or they are against us. مَا يَلْفِظُ مِنْ قَوْلٍ إِلَّا لَدَيْهِ رَقِيبٌ عَتِيدٌ. Every word that we utter is documented. Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anhu asked the Prophet ﷺ that are we going to be held accountable for what we say? Nabi ﷺ said, ثَكِلَتْكَ أُمُّكَ يَا مُعَاذ وَهَلْ يَكُبُ النَّاسَ عَلَى مَنَاخِرِهِمْ فِي جَهَنَّمْ إِلَّا حَصَائِدُ أَلْسِنَتِهِمْ. What's wrong with you, Mu'adh? What else is going to throw people face first or nose first into Jahannam? But the crops they have reaped with their tongues. The crops they have harvested with their tongues. And Nabi ﷺ gives the example, of speech as seeds. Every time we speak, we're planting a seed. That seed is going to result in some kind of a crop. And the day of judgment is the day of harvest. If the speech was good, the seeds were good, they will yield good crop, good results. And if it was the seed of lying, or the seed of backbiting, or the seed of slandering, or the seed of insulting someone, hurtful speech, or any other of a negative nature, then the crops will be negative, and the harvest is the outcome of all of that speech. Most people will end up being punished because of their speech. That's what this hadith is telling us. Now, talking. So, this is not this is not a discussion on the fiqh of talking, of speech, but one of the major gateways to the heart is what we say, what we talk about. Whatever we utter, it has a direct impact on our heart. The other major gateway to the heart is the eyes, what we look at. What we look at. And everything that we channel our gaze towards immediately brings an imprint into our heart. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us, وَقُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ وَيَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُمْ. Tell the believers to lower their gaze. When is this? Anytime a non-mahram comes in front of you, lower your gaze and protect your dignity. وَيَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُمْ ذَلِكَ أَزْكَى لَهُمْ. That is purer for them. At that moment, Allah didn't say, tell them to check their intention, why they're looking. Make sure that their intention is okay. No, just lower your gaze. Allah is the creator of this heart. وَإِنَّمَا سُمِّيَ الْقَلْبُ لِتَقَلُّبِهِ. This heart has been called qalb because it shifts so quickly. Taqallub. It shifts very, very quickly from one state to the other. So what the eyes look at leave an imprint on the heart. In Sahih al-Bukhari, there's a narration about Rasulullah ﷺ at the occasion of Hajjatul Wada'. He is just about to leave Muzdalifah after performing wuquf. This is now the morning of the 10th of Dhul Hijjah. He is on his camel, and behind him is his cousin Fadl ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu. As Rasulullah ﷺ is about to depart from Muzdalifah to go back to Mina, a young lady comes to ask a question about Hajj. Before the Prophet ﷺ answers her, he turns around and grabs Fadl ibn Abbas by the chin, by the face, and he turns his face the other way. And he keeps holding him there in that hold. He has his hand gripping him and keeps him there. The girl or the young lady makes her inquiry. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam answers her. She turns around to go away. Then he releases the face of Fadl. Somebody is watching and saying, ow, that must have hurt him. They asked Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam that, oh Prophet, why did you do that to your cousin? He said that he is a young, attractive man, and she was a young, attractive woman. I was afraid that shaitan may create fitna. Now I ask you a question. Is there any safer place than right with, immediately next to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? Could there be a safer place for a person's iman and a person's taqwa? And I ask you, could there be a more sacred state than the state of ihram? And I ask you, could there be a purer state than immediately after the wuquf of Arafah, where Allah has announced forgiveness for everyone? Al-Hajj Arafah. There could not be a purer state. There could not be a safer place. There could not be a more holy disposition. Even there, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam turned his face away. And here we are in California, doing what we do, looking at whatever we want to look at. And inside we tell ourselves that we're so pious. Brother, Allah knows the conditions of the heart. Allah knows. That's why He told you to lower your gaze. Darn right He knows. So, what we look at has an imprint on the heart. Every time we look at something, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, this gaze is a poisoned arrow from the arrows of Iblis. A person who lowers their gaze when they have the opportunity to look at haram, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala compensates them by creating a sweetness of iman that they feel. They will feel it in their worship. Okay. Another major gateway to our nafs, to our heart, is what we eat, what we consume. So obviously, the moment a person consumes haram, they're deprived of many, many things. Their du'as are not accepted, their worship is not accepted, a lot of things happen. And there are two types of haram. One is that the substance itself is haram, and secondly, the source could be haram. In other words, the way they obtained it, the method of obtaining it could be haram. Somebody steals a piece of halal chicken, for example, okay, it's not halal. Yes, the substance is halal, but the way it was obtained is haram, therefore it is haram. But aside from that, aside from the haram aspect, the more we stuff ourselves, the more we eat, and this is actually where I'm going to bring Ramadan into it. The more we fill these bellies, we are actually not just feeding our bellies, we are feeding our carnality. We are feeding our carnal desires. The shahwa, the carnal desire which a person has difficulty controlling, it arises from the belly. It arises from stuffing this belly. And I talked about speech, I talked about gaze. The people that talk arrogantly, the people that say things that they later regret, they blurt out in anger, they're not the ones who are controlling and disciplining themselves through fasting. They're the ones who are constantly stuffing themselves, and as a result, they're making their nafs, their carnal self, stronger and stronger and stronger. So you have the body, you have the ruh. The nafs is attached to the body and its desires. The ruh is only attached to the body because it is infused into the body. The body has come from the ground, from this earth. All its needs are also fulfilled from things of this earth. The ruh has not come from this earth. وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ قُلِ الرُّوحُ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي. This ruh has come directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it has been infused into this body. The needs of the ruh also come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They don't come from the things of this world. The ruh is fed, is nourished by A, the ma'rifah, the recognition of Allah, B, the remembrance of Allah, and C, constant obedience to Allah and abstaining from disobedience. The ruh becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. Opposite of that is the nafs, the carnal, physical, material being that we are. And there is a constant tussle between these two. When we keep feeding our body, we're empowering the body to subdue the ruh. The ruh has come from Allah. It wants to go to Allah. It wants to take us towards Allah. It wants to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The body has come from this earth. It wants to stay here. I hope this is making sense. When through fasting we reduce the intake of nourishment to the body, we finally give that ruh a chance to develop its strength. And we empower it to become stronger and stronger and stronger so that it starts subduing the body. Is this making sense? Yes? When the body is fed and fed and fed and fed, it is very, very difficult to control the desires of the body. Whether it is the desires of the tongue or it is the desires of the eyes. This is the connection. When we remove food from this equation and we channel the body's energy to worship and meditation, to dhikr and dua, salat, qiyam, we are nourishing this ruh. It's been starving all year. We give it partial doses. We give it little doses, 5 times salat, maybe a little bit of tilawat here and there, maybe a little other good deed here and there. But by and large, we're living for our bodies, in our bodies. So this ruh finally has a chance to come out and to perform and to show how beautiful of a person we can actually be. Ya khadim al-jismi, kam tashqa li khidmatihi, atatlubu al-ribha bima fihi khusranu, inhad ila al-ruhi fastakmil fada'ilaha, fa anta bil-ruhi la bil-jismi insanu. It says how you feed this body, how you tire yourself in serving this body, clothing it, feeding it, keeping it warm, keeping it cool, giving it transport, giving it a shelter, giving it comfort, how you exhaust yourself in feeding it. He says, why are you settling for a deal in which you will only lose? Why? Because this body is temporary. It's going to go back down into the ground. The ruh is going to live on. He's saying you're dedicating all of your resources, your time, your energy to something which is going to finish. So start paying attention to your ruh and start beautifying it, adorning it, making it complete. He says it's your ruh. It's your ruh that separates you from animals, not your body. Now, we've empowered the ruh, and the ruh wants to make its way to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we have to dedicate our energy to salihat, to good deeds. We can't allow ourselves to just be in a neutral state. A lot of us pass Ramadan in a neutral state. Neutral means we're not doing anything wrong, but we're not exerting ourselves either in doing good. Ramadan is a month to push ourselves. Really, really push ourselves. Sometimes Shaitan says, oh no, you're fasting, you're going to get weak. We tell our kids, you're going to get weak. We tell ourselves we're going to get weak, so it's better. I need to rest, I need to rest, I need to rest. No. If you want to get the most out of this month, push yourself. فَإِذَا فَرَغْتَ فَانْصَبْ. Learn to tire yourself. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Those that strive to get closer to Allah, Allah opens up to them paths. I'm going to interrupt this with a little story. It has to do with the first part of this talk, the physical benefits. When I was studying alternative medicine, one of the modalities that was presented to us was, it's a modality of checking and testing the patient. It's done through live blood cell testing. Now, this is not used for diagnosis, it's just used to look at the history of the person. So what happens is you take blood, just a drop of blood from the person, and right away you put it under the microscope. It's a special kind of microscope, allows you to see the conditions of the cells. So it's a study of the condition of the blood cells, A, and B, the condition of the environment that the cells are floating in. What's in there? Is there garbage in there? Is there junk in there? Is it clean? What's happening in there? So this is done through 2 tests, a wet test and a dry test. The wet test tells you what is in your blood right now. The dry test enables you to do a little bit of history of what was happening. So the professor, after teaching everything, did some in-class tests as demos, and my sample was one of the ones used for that. So This was right after Ramadan. Yani it was the day after Eid. So when she looked at the dry sample, she said, what's been happening here? She said, I see a lot of junk in your system dating back about a month ago. But it looks like you've really cleaned things up. What have you been doing? I said, we just completed the month of Ramadan, the month of fasting. So she said, oh, so you're fasting, so you're staying away from certain kinds of foods? I said, no. I just don't eat between dawn and sunset. She said, okay, so you were staying away from dairy and animal proteins? I said, no, I was having all of that stuff. I was having milk and I was having meat, and she was like, but, okay, what else were you doing? I said, well, we spent a lot of that time reading the Quran. And I told her about Taraweeh and how the entire Quran is recited. And during the day, the Hufaz, they prepare. I said a lot of my time was dedicated just reading Quran. I was fasting, and then I would eat at the ends of the day. She said, it's not possible that someone does what you did and not have these results. It's not possible that someone does what you did and not have these results. Yani, what you have done is a sure way to cleanse your system. It's an absolutely sure way. Because they know the power of meditation and reflection and worship. They know the power of this. And they know the power of fasting. But fasting creates in us that nur. Because we are able to control our tongues. What did Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam teach us about fasting? Fasting is a shield. الصوم جنة فإذا كان صوم أحدكم فلا يرفث ولا يفسق. When you're fasting, then don't use obscene language. Don't use sinful language. And if somebody comes to you and starts fighting with you, فَإِن سَابَّهُ أَوْ قَاتَلَهُ أَحَدٌ, somebody starts insulting you, somebody starts a fight with you, what should you do? فَلْيَقُلْ إِنِّ امْرُؤٌ صَائِمٌ إِنِّ امْرُؤٌ صَائِمٌ. I'm fasting. That's it. Do not engage. Fasting teaches us to discipline our tongues, and it's easier to do once the belly is empty. We're not feeding that shahwa of speaking, because speaking is also a shahwa. How many times have you been in a gathering and you say, I absolutely must say this thing? You feel no, I have to say, I have to make this comment. It's a shahwa. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam taught us to discipline our tongues in the month of Ramadan. مَنْ لَمْ يَدَعْ قَوْلَ الزُّورِ وَالْعَمَلَ بِهِ فَلَيْسَ لِلَّهِ حَاجَةٌ أَنْ يَدَعَ طَعَامًا وَشَرَابًا. A person can't stop lying and can't stop doing things, wrong things. Allah doesn't need him to stay away from fasting and drinking, from eating and drinking. In the other riwayah, where people were fasting, two women sent a message to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam that the fast has become so difficult for them that they feel like they're going to die. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam instructed to have them vomit. Make them vomit into a bowl and tell me what happens. When these two women vomited, raw meat and blood came out. And everyone was appalled. How did this happen? We didn't consume this. So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, they fasted from food and drink, but they did not fast. In other words, they did not restrain themselves from the reputations and the honor of people. They spent their day backbiting. Allah showed it in that form. So we have been taught to discipline these tongues while we're fasting. And because the food is not there to fuel our desire, it becomes easy for us to guard our gaze. And what else? Unnecessary intermingling with people. Now we are social creatures. We need to meet, we need to talk. And it's okay to meet and talk. And Islam has laid a great deal of emphasis on how we should meet each other with a cheerful disposition. And a person should have good akhlaq. They should not be, sour and frowning all the time. But having said that, it's also not necessary to be meeting with people all the time. A person needs to seclude themselves and take out some of that traffic from their head, the traffic of people. And so there are different kinds of people. There are some people that you absolutely need to meet. Meeting them is like a remedy, it's like a cure for a disease. These are the people who guide us towards deen. These are the people who give us insight in deen. They help resolve our issues. They guide us towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They help us understand His deen. So meeting them is like a remedy. It's like medicine. Then there are some people that meeting them, it's as necessary as food. These are the people that you need to interact with for your business, for your work, people in your family. You absolutely need to interact with them. You cannot live or function without meeting these people. So meeting them, of course, is necessary. It's a need, and you can go ahead and do it and keep it within the limits of Sharia. And then there are some people that meeting them, it's like acquiring a sickness. What does that mean? It means that you're not getting any religious or spiritual benefit from them. You're not getting any worldly benefit from them either. In fact, they're going to talk, they're going to crowd your mind with all kinds of thoughts and ideas. They're going to think that they are such a great influence on you and that they are so helpful to you, but in fact, they're just wasting your time. So these types of people you need to stay away from. And then there are some people that meeting them is like poison. These are the people who introduce doubts and suspicions into your mind about Allah, about His deen. Same thing with talking. Talking is of different types. There is some talking that is purely beneficial. There is some talking, some speech that is purely harmful. And there is some speech that is somewhere in between. So speech that's purely harmful needs to be left out. Speech that is partially harmful, partially beneficial also needs to be left out because the harm will outweigh the benefit. And then the speech that is beneficial, it needs to be spoken with caution because shaitan can use that against us. Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu says, Inna lil hasanati diya'an fil wajh. Talking about spiritual benefits of fasting. This is a spiritual benefit of every good deed. Inna lil hasanati diya'an fil wajh. Every good deed brings a radiance in the face of the person who does it. Wa nuran fil qalb. A light into the heart. A light into the heart. And a light in the heart does the same thing that the lights in this hall are doing. They're allowing us to see things clearly, allowing us to navigate. That light in the heart is what's going to help you navigate yourself in life. Avoid mistakes. And وَقُوَّةً فِي الْبَدَنِ. And every good deed brings a strength into the body. وَبَسْطَةً فِي الرِّزْقِ. And every good deed brings an increment, brings an increase to your rizq. وَمَحَبَّةً فِي قُلُوبِ الْخَلْقِ. And it brings love for you in the hearts of others. وَإِنَّ لِلسَّيِّئَةِ سَوَادًا فِي الْوَجْهِ. And every misdeed, every sin brings about this ominous darkness in your face. People who have worked on purifying their hearts can actually detect it and sense it. It's a gloom that befalls the face. وَظُلْمَةً فِي الْقَلْبِ. And darkness penetrates into the heart. Just like turning off the lights. You're bumping into walls, you're bumping into pillars, you're bumping into people. You can't tell your friend from your foe. You can't tell from your helpers from those who are going to harm you. وَوَهْنًا فِي الْبَدَنِ. And it brings a weakness, a kind of lethargy into the body. وَنَقْصًا فِي الرِّزْقِ. Decreases your rizq. وَبَغْضَةً فِي قُلُوبِ الْخَلْقِ. And it brings a dislike for you in the hearts of other people. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to access the riches and treasures that He has put in this month of Ramadan through this beautiful act of fasting. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells us As-sawmu wal-Qur'anu yashfa'an. The Sawm, fasting, and the Qur'an both will intercede for the person on the Day of Judgment. The Qur'an will say, Ay Rabbi, mana'tuhu an-nawma bil-layl. Oh Allah, I kept him from sleeping at night. He used to stay up and recite me. And the fast will say, Ay Rabbi, mana'tuhu at-ta'ama bin-nahar. Oh Allah, I did not allow him to eat during the day. Qal, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, فَيُشَفَّعَانِ. The intercession of both is accepted. So here we are, in the month of fasting, in the month of Qur'an. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to use these last few days in exerting ourselves, pushing ourselves to get closer and closer to Him. I talked about unnecessary meeting with people. How does Ramadan treat that? Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam taught us about this by i'tikaf. He, being the Prophet of all mankind, till Yawm al-Qiyamah, even he took out time where he secluded himself from people and kept himself with just Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without the distractions of mankind. So this is also something for us to think about. It's a moment for us to reflect on our lives, reflect on our life before Ramadan, what our life will be like after Ramadan, and what you and I are going to do to maximize the potential of this month to permanently transform ourselves. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the strength, wisdom and courage. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.